Hey guys, so in this video I'll be sharing the process that I use to push through cost price updates on Amazon Vendor Central. So for those of you who are new here, my name is Benjamin Bolshinsky. I used to work at Amazon for almost 3 years in the vendor management team, and now I run a company called Vendor Launch where we work with Amazon vendors to increase their purchase orders. So without further ado, updating cost prices can be one of the most tricky things to do as a vendor. This is the process that I use. Step one, try and update them yourself through Vendor Central self-service functionality. So basically what you do is you log into Vendor Central, you go into the menu on the left, you navigate to items and then edit item costs. You select the ASINs that you want to update, enter a new cost, and you send that across. You upload it. Now, in many cases, the system will automatically reject any cost price increases, right? Because Amazon will be losing margin. So in those scenarios, you need the help of a vendor manager. So step two, if that Vendor Central self-service doesn't work, which it most likely won't, you have to then reach out to your vendor manager. And really, what you want to do here is you want to build a case for your vendor manager to convince them to to put through the cost price increase, which they can do themselves internally. And so how do you build this case? You pretty much want to show the vendor manager the following things. They want to see that their margin will not decrease, right? Net PPM margin is one of their KPIs, and they want to be sure, they want to be certain that by putting through the CPI, they're not going to suffer a degradation in their margin. And so what you want to do is you want to show an increase in RRPs, right? If your RRP increases as well as your costs, the net margin will stay consistent, will stay the same, and so the vendor manager is more likely to push that cost price update through. You want to, so no decrease in margin net PPM. That's ultimately what you want to show. And you really need to be able to convince your VM that the wider market pricing will follow. They're concerned that the cost price increase is limited to the only the Amazon channel. So you want to kind of show them that the broader retail segment will follow as well. So if you're supplying to other retailers, you want to tell them, you want to convince them that these price changes are being put through not only through Amazon but through your other retailers as well. And the reason you want to do this is because even if you increase the RRPs on Amazon, right, Amazon's site price, they will still match that of other retailers, right? So an increase in the RRP is absolutely meaningless for Amazon if the broader market will not also increase the RRPs. The broader market, the other retailers you're supplying to, if their site price remains the same, it doesn't increase, then Amazon will match it anyway, right? So that's what your vendor manager is really concerned about, is that you put through the cost price increase. I mean, even if you put through an RRP increase on Amazon, they're concerned that your pricing, Amazon's pricing, will continue to follow that of the wider market, which may not have increased as well. So yeah, really that's kind of what you want to do. And this really is more of a negotiation. It really depends on the relationship you have with your vendor manager and how convincing a case you can kind of put towards them. You know, you can suggest that once we do put through the CPI, you'll be invested more in promotions, in marketing. So, you know, your vendor manager wants to grow your account as well. So yeah, you really want to kind of paint a picture of where this fits in the broader strategy of the account. And so step three, say you've been unsuccessful in doing that, you know, the vendor manager is playing hard to get and they're not putting through the pricing increase. This takes you to step three, where it's more of an offensive, you know, potentially delisting or stopping supplying the product. You know, that's also an option as well. That is some leverage that you have as a supplier. A lot of suppliers forget that because, you know, the vendor manager has multiple KPIs. One of the KPIs is sales and customer views. And if the customer can't buy a product that they, a lot of customers want to buy, then that's the leverage you have. So you can potentially move into the direction of delisting and stopping supplying the product for some time. And then your vendor manager, perhaps they might be more inclined to meet you halfway if it means that they can still supply that product to the consumer. If the vendor manager can buy the product from other sources, from other vendors, and this is a bit harder to use as leverage because they can buy it from someone else. But if you're the sole supplier of a product that is in high demand for customers, then this is often a very good point of leverage. And then, look, you might also want to consider that, if the commercials don't work, then perhaps, the approach might be to permanently delist the product. If the vendor manager can't facilitate an increase in pricing and you can't continue supplying at the current price and you just can't meet halfway, then perhaps the approach is to delist the product on Amazon and potentially supply it through some of your other retail channels. The other thing to note about these cost price negotiations, discussions, oftentimes when you do agree to a cost price increase, your vendor manager agrees and puts it through. Very often the vendor manager will manually raise a purchase order, a bulk purchase order, before they put through the cost price increase. And so that way they get more inventory at that lower cost. So that's just something to be mindful of. Say, for example, the VM holds around 4 weeks stock in their fulfillment center at any given time, 4 weeks worth of cover, which I think is pretty standard, particularly in CPG, consumables. You might agree to a cost price increase. They might increase their stocks weeks of cover to say 12. They might order 2 or 3 times the amount just to get more inventory at that lower cost price. So that's just something to be mindful of. The other kind of tip I would have in relation to these discussions is it's best to start this out with a lot of wait time, because the first strategy that a vendor manager has is to just delay the discussion as long as possible. So these discussions, these cost price negotiations take 2, 3 months, 4 months. So it's always good to start it as soon as you can and to give yourself a bit more leeway. I believe also Amazon have like a 60-day requirement that they often say, but again, they can really put through these cost price increases whenever they want. It's more of a tactic for them to just delay the discussions as long as possible. So start them sooner rather than later. And so that concludes this video. Let me know if you have any questions, and talk soon. Bye.